Right, so hello everyone and welcome to Share Podcast. This is episode number 47 of the series. If you're new to the podcast is a weekly series where I bring on guests from the games and film industry to talk about everything art and everything film related. And today it's just myself, but today I want to cover a podcast aspect that I've never really talked about in depth. And I've done the podcast for let's say nearly 9 months now, and the podcast has been obviously I've had the privilege to talk to so many great artists, and that's obviously been amazing, and it's an awesome opportunity. And there's one thing I've always wanted to talk about, and that is social media. And social media has been this like massive beast for years, but it's only been really kind of I guess highlighted by artists or taken advantage of by artists the most, I would say, in the last 5 years. Obviously it does depend on obviously your knowledge overall on art, your knowledge on the industry, but things change all the time, and that's the thing when it comes to student education. It'd be great if this was more brought up and really actually talked to about in depth, because you could really make a name for yourself if you work smart and you really think about social media. And social media being this massive beast that it is, whether it's you're using, for example, Twitter, Facebook, ArtStation, YouTube, Instagram, there's all these different platforms for you to utilize as an artist. And it's down for you to obviously do the research, explore into different things. And without your actual understanding of how to utilize it the most, and or how to at least benefit from it like in the slightest, then it's going to obviously take good research and knowing the right people. Like knowing the right people is always an important one for me, because knowing the right people and asking for the right advice goes such a long way. Obviously, I can say to you guys, right, I need you guys to go talk to this person, go talk to this person, and obviously do your best through talking to them and stuff. But the hard thing about um, asking people and stuff is finding the right question to ask. And like I said, so when it comes to social media, so I wouldn't say I'm an expert, but I've learned a lot of things that I've made. Like I've made a lot of mistakes, obviously, through all the years of trying different things through trial and error through social media, and doing my YouTube videos and stuff, such as naming conventions, how to tag people, how to write things in a professional manner, how to draw people in through interesting thumbnails. This all applies to your artwork in terms of your brand and who you are as a person. So branding is such a big thing, because it's the thing that draws people in. So when you're creating a thumbnail, for example, for your ArtStation, your portfolio, you want people to come in and see what what you've made, and in order to entice them and bring them to your following and to your social media platforms, you have to present it in a way that people are going to want to click it. And being able to have that skill set to create something in a way that naturally people just are drawn to it, that's a massive skill set and advantage you have already over everyone else. And you have to acknowledge that sometimes it doesn't take the being the best at art that makes your name get noticed. Working smart, talking to people, and making your name known through different things. So the main thing for me, obviously, so I was trying to find an outlet early on through social media. How could I create a name for myself? And creating a name for yourself was obviously so hard for so many artists. And the main thing for me was obviously the podcast. So I utilized my best skill, which is talking. And I've talked so many times, so many presentations over the years, that I knew naturally it would just be good for me. And it was something that I always felt like I had a lot of information to back up. Obviously, I still consider myself a rookie in the industry in regards to like knowledge and skill set, but there's still a lot of things that I've developed through time and through my 9 years of this pursuit of pursuing my like career dream basically. And when it comes to art, you have to really think about everything. Like all things have to come together as one, but that one thing is the name. And you're probably wondering, what do I mean by the name? So when it comes to social media, there's a lot of people name their Instagram a certain name, their Facebook a certain name, or whatever. But the one thing that I've realized that's developed my name the most is by keeping everything the same. So Ross Baxter this, Ross Baxter this. So Ross Baxter Art is literally my tag for everything, barring my YouTube channel. Um, Keeping things consistent is the one thing that everyone can then relate to. So if you have, for example, a name, so say you have a game artist name, and you've kept that consistent over the years, people then refer you to that, and that becomes your brand. And obviously, naturally, over time, because of you doing that for so long, that's what you'll continue to be known as. So when it came to my brand, the thing that I cared about the most was having just my name. So Ross Baxter. I didn't want to limit myself to anything else. I purely wanted to focus on my name. So that was my brand, and it always was my brand. I felt like I prefer having my name itself the focal point rather than, I don't know, um, like for example, my Xbox. I have an Xbox name. I don't know, like, or like my league name is like Knight something, and having that would then, like, having too many names would then obviously make it more complicated for people to find me on social media, or to at least recognize the podcast and listen to the podcast. So I obviously, when it comes to social media, I'm on about 30 different platforms, and the reason behind that is because I know the bigger reach, the more I broaden out, the bigger reach I have, and the more target audience I'll be able to accomplish. And the other reason why I keep the name as Ross Baxter, particularly on my YouTube channel, is that then it doesn't limit me to what I can do on my channel. So obviously my channel is well, it's all for artists. However, in the future, once I develop my brand more and develop my name more, I can then broaden that out, and the name still doesn't affect what content I'm creating. So say if I called it 3D art channel, or best 3D art channel for artists, or whatever, you know what I mean, then I'm limiting my scope, and that all tailors back to your brand, and that's why you should never limit yourselves. And like the next other main thing is knowing like naming conventions, or how to word something. So when you're creating a thumbnail, or you're creating a video on YouTube, or a post on Twitter, you less is more, but always having an image is so key, and writing the amount of tags. So over the last 3 months, I've been spamming things like crazy, and the reason for that, so I'm aware people might be getting frustrated because they're getting constant spam, but I've been spamming things to acknowledge, to see what people like and what people don't like, and seeing what actually works. And the one thing I've realized on my channel is that the majority of people are environment artists, and I kind of assumed that early on, but the more videos I've created, the more different the videos are in terms of views. So the environment art views, like say for example, one of my podcasts is an environment artist, they get like say a couple of thousand views, and then the character artist view will be like 600. So there's been like a 75% to 25% sort of percentage in terms of what the majority of my audience is, or my target audience is. And this is the hard thing when it comes to marketing yourself and developing that brand, and that is um the so the most famous thing in terms of making your name is keeping to one thing. So for example, I'm an environment artist. I would get more chance to develop my name more if I focus purely on environment art. However, I've got a plan long term that there's a reason why I've branched out to all these different things. And I believe in having a scope. And if you listen to my previous podcasts, I talked to Disney artist Fraser McLean, and the best advice that I got from his podcast and through his teachings over the years is that when you limit yourself to a certain skill set, obviously that's then limiting yourself overall for years. Because if you keep practicing different things, so obviously if you have your main focal point, so you've got your environment art, but on the side, if you're also practicing character art, you then have a chance to get an edge in front of everyone else. Obviously, you don't have to be a master, but having that slight knowledge is so important. And once again, all this thing then sucks in together and tailors towards your brand, because if you can reach out to a broader audience, then you have more people who are going to want to listen to your podcast, or watch your content, or come to your content and see your content. And at the end of the day, when it comes to especially artists, it's really hard to make money in art, in the sense that through social media. However, there's also like really great opportunities out there as well. Because obviously the common thing when it comes to art is that as long as you create great artwork, you'll have a massive following. So there's a lot of really good artists who've worked for years, worked on their craft, and therefore have developed a good brand, and they've developed a lot of art. And you have to really think about, how can I say it? Think about all these different questions. So your target audience, what do you want to achieve? Do you want to create an Instagram following? So being consistent. The consistency is everything, and a lot of people don't realize like what I mean by consistency. So consistency doesn't mean once a month or once a week. Consistency to really develop your brand is pretty much every day, and unless your content for that one video a week is insane, then it's going to be so hard for you to develop that brand. And that's why branding is such a, it's still a beast, and I'm still trying to figure it out myself. And it's been taking me a while to kind of figure out how to brand my artwork, how to kind of, um, I guess, draw people in. But that's when patience comes in. Like, it doesn't happen overnight. And like another one is like, for example, when you're on Instagram. When I first started Instagram, I had no idea how to use it. So I was just posting images, and I didn't know how to tag things. I didn't know how to draw an audience. So I had, like, no joke, like 3 followers for months, and then I finally learned just through basic research on Google, like how to develop an audience through Instagram. So I learned how to tag things, what the right tags were, the amount of tags used, tagging people as well. So people who I know will also share it and so forth. And that's another thing as well. If you have if you can work on a foundation with your friends, that's a great way to develop your name. So if you have for example, a group of 5 friends that you always work together with, or you're really close with, having those 5 friends is super important to maybe branching out your work more. So if you got together, say on a Discord or whatever, and you were like, right, all 5 of us, we're going to share all our work all the time together to develop our brand together. And then that means the reach and the scope that you've then shared amongst is going to grow naturally. Obviously, it's going to inevitably progress further because you have more people to share it. So really thinking about how to spread your scope once again. So at the end of the day, it's all about creating that scope and developing more numbers, because numbers at the end of the day, when it comes to, how can I say it, when it comes to like, numbers is everything, and it's such a hard thing to judge, especially if you're new to social media. Like, for example, on YouTube, it took me 7 years to create. Like, it took me 7 years to get to 1,000 subscribers, and then after 7 years, it took me 3 months or 2 months, or no, 3 months to get another 1,000 subscribers, and it's it's such a, I guess the hardest part is the start, and acknowledging that sometimes it is a grind. Like, sometimes you get lucky. Like, there's a few good friends of mine that have just been in the right place at the right time, and that's gone such a long way for them. And uh, that's the thing, though. You should not have to be waiting for anyone. Like, waiting for anyone is the worst thing that you can do. So really be patient. Really figure out how to get an advantage over other people, and, well, not necessarily just an advantage over other people, but really thinking about how to make friends, make contacts, develop a name through making good friendships and stuff. And I've been really fortunate with all the people I've been taught by over the years. I've talked to a lot of artists, um, taught by a lot of different lecturers, and that's been so crucial to my kind of growth on social media. Like, I'm still really small, like, in terms of, like, so I've got a few thousand followers on my social medias, but it took me a long time. Like, I said in my previous video, it took me 9 years to get my dream job, and 9 years is a long time. And then there's so I'm 23, and like, there'll be artists out there like, oh, but maybe something happened, maybe you got lucky in that. Well, 9 years isn't 9 years wouldn't be luck, because it's 9 years is a long time, and there's some artists that are a lot quicker than others. Um, Maybe it's just because they've done it longer, maybe they're a lot older, and that's the thing as well. When you're studying it as well, don't compare yourself, because every time you compare yourself, You just put yourself down and it doesn't help anyone. You should always think about how can we help each other, because helping each other is going to be the best thing. Right, so social media. So what platforms do I use? So I use a lot of different platforms, from your Poly account, your YouTube, your Twitter, your Instagram, your ArtStation, your Pinterest. What else do I use? So I have 10 platforms for my podcast. So I've got Anchor, Spotify, iTunes, and these are only some of the platforms that I use to kind of help develop that name and that brand. So figure out what kind of art do you do? What are you trying to accomplish? Is there art that you want to make? Is it something specific? Is it environment art? Is it character art? If it is environment art, figure out what environment artists have done in the past to give them an edge. Have they posted their art station in a certain way through the thumbnail? Have they worded it very limited, to make it less wordy? Because a lot of people, when they read too much words, they get frustrated. So small and concise and accurate. Keep it simple. There's no point overcomplicating it. And then after that, thinking about layout, like layout and presentation is once again part of your brand, and keeping the color theme consistent. So if you can keep everything within the same sort of pattern. So for example, I'm rebranding stuff at the moment and it's taking a long time, but I'm wanting to do it the right way, and keeping everything relatable to not only my name, but obviously what I do. So I'm a podcaster. I do motivational talks and stuff. I'm an artist. I do sports. So that's my four pillars. That's the four areas of content that I have to base my brand around. Therefore, naturally, everything has to fall within that brand. And the other aspect when it comes to the brand is learning the business aspect. So how do you then make money from your brand, and how do you then create sponsors? So I'm working with a few people at the moment with sponsors to get things rolling on my content overall, so on YouTube and so forth. And until you learn the basics, so like you won't be able to grow, and you have to realize that it's going to be there'll be times of struggle, but that's okay. That's how you learn and that's how you grow. But you have to begin asking questions all the time, really thinking about things in depth, and really thinking about what you want out of it. Because if you don't get the questions that you need and you just rush into it, then you're not going to get that growth, and it's not going to go the way that you wanted. And I've been very privileged to, when it comes to my YouTube channel, I have a few friends who are big YouTubers, and they've told me all the biggest weaknesses that I've made over the years. And it wouldn't be, and if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be where I am in terms of my growth. Like I'm still obviously, I've got miles to go in terms of my progress, but that's okay. But having the knowledge is so important to making any money in art. And art is such an industry that's so difficult at times to develop that brand. So you really have to really look into everything in depth. That's why I always say like thumbnails are so important. And then ArtStation, going back to the whole sort of idea of ArtStation, is like the reason why people follow you and the reason why you have a lot of followers is personally is simply because you've done well in your craft, that you've got great art. And a lot of people ask all the time, like, how do I not have a following yet? It's because of a few things. The art quality is simply not there, or you're not presenting yourself in a way for people to be intrigued. And that's why the first thing that people see is the most important part. And it may not be like you may not be the best artist, like say if you're an environment artist or concept artist, but if you can draw them in with just that small section on the screen that you have to entice that click, then you're already in the right direction in terms of later down the line when your art does get start kicking off. And this is the other one thing that's also important that I realized is spam. So I talked briefly about it earlier. So I've been spamming things like crazy, but I've been spamming things like crazy intentionally, and it's to find answers that I needed to find answered through a test of spamming things. So people naturally don't like spam. So for example, when you get spam in your email, you instantly delete it. But when it comes to spam, you really have to think about why you're spamming it. So, for example, if I'm on Twitter and I'm putting, say, because I do quite a lot of podcasts, so say I do 3 podcasts per week. So that means people are going to get 3 posts minimum per week. And that can be quite frustrating depending on the person. But that's when it comes to how you market yourself. So if what I've done, so say I spam it, so say I put 3 posts out, and then I then press share a few hours later, that's then doubled to 6. So then people are going to then get more frustrated if you've got so much posts already on Twitter. So say you have like your daily just random tweet for the day, and then you've got your share of say I've got 2 shares of a podcast, and then I've posted maybe an art piece that I've worked on. Then that's developed a lot of Twitter posts, and then people kind of might get frustrated. So you really have to think about what you want your followers to see. Obviously, if you're just wanting to develop a brand, or how should I say it? So if you're purely just trying to create numbers and stuff, like the old technique, well, I hope people don't do it. So I don't do this because I don't like it. So a lot of people do the follow unfollow system, in which you keep following hundreds and thousands of people, and then eventually unfollow them, just and then your numbers sort of cancel out, but it never actually plans out. Like a lot of people do that in the hope just to so that they'll have like say 3,000 followers, but they're also following 3,000 people, and I don't see the point in that. So for example, on my Twitter, I have what 425 followers, so I have really small amount of followers, but I've only got like 50 or something followers. So I'm only following about 50 people, and the reason why I only follow about 50 people is because I only want to follow the people that I want to follow. And this may be a bit harder then to create your following, but it's more natural, it's more organic. So naturally over time, it will then escalate better, and you'll actually be seeing content that you want to see. The other beast that a lot of people don't realize that's super important when it comes to posting is the power of Facebook and the power of Facebook groups. So Facebook groups is pretty much one of the main reasons that my channel grew early on. So when I was in like the hundreds of subscriber mark, I had to think about how could I then reach out to thousands and thousands of people. And the reason why my subscribers got to the thousands mark was because of constantly sharing through about 50 groups on Facebook. So I was literally asking so many people, I was posting on so many Facebook groups, my artwork, and that then developed my following through that. And obviously, the most important thing when it comes to Facebook groups, read the Facebook groups that you're posting your artwork on and see the rules. Because if you for example, I've got banned from one Facebook group, not in a bad way, but it's just because I didn't read the rules. Therefore, they said that in the description that if you advertise or promote yourself, we instantly remove you from the Facebook group. And I didn't notice it because I didn't read it, and that then made me learn of how to post things on Facebook. So there's so many things on Facebook. There's literally no joke about say 10 environment art Facebook groups. So the main famous one is 10,000 hours. So that's a reach of 90,000 people. Your artwork is instantly getting shown by. So when I finally posted my train piece on that post got 1,000 likes, and that 1,000 likes is then what drove my following on ArtStation. So really think smart about Facebook groups. Look at all the different Facebook groups you can use and utilize to the best of your ability, whether you're an animator, whether you're a concept artist, a 3D artist, a technical artist. There's so many things on Facebook that a lot of artists have still not acknowledged yet. And you really have to think about, um, once again, going back to the naming thing and the reading the rules. So if it says in the rules, you have to word things in a certain way, or you're allowed 3 images max. Follow that exactly by that, because then you're kind of creating even though you don't know the person, the admin in charge of the Facebook group, you've then got an advantage because you've always stayed true to what they wanted, and they will allow you to constantly post. And so another target audience for me is podcasters and stuff, and seeing what podcasts people do out there to give them an edge. So I've read into books about podcasts. I've read into people's advice on how to share podcasts, platforms about podcasts, um, what frustrates people when it comes to podcasts. So for example, I realized that promoting a lot of people's stuff at the start is actually quite frustrating, because a lot of people like to get straight into the knowledge. They just want to, because people crave knowledge, and when they don't get it straight away, they get frustrated. Like for example, when I'm checking a tutorial out on 3D, what I like to do is I like to get to the answer straight as possible, and I'm pretty sure you do too. So when I'm doing podcasts, I then have to kind of figure out how to approach it that way. Obviously, I still need to get my promotions or my information of where to find my podcast out. So, for example, on the podcast, I say the Shoot Art podcast is live on 9 other platforms, blah 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 blah, such as Anchor, Apple Podcasts, and stuff. So I need to figure out where the best timing for that is, and naturally, obviously, a lot of people like to get things out straight away, but the problem about that is that the viewership by most people or attention span is between five and 20 minutes when it comes to podcasts. And if your podcast is an hour long, you need to make sure that in the opening few minutes people want to watch and listen. So that's where music comes into play. That's where thinking about timing comes into play. And I've got miles and miles to go to develop that, like, just professional quality, but it's slowly developing and it's slowly getting there. So these are some of the other things that I want to talk about. So for example, Facebook was one of the main ones because a lot of artists, particularly good artists, like there's so many good artists out there that don't have the following that they deserve because maybe they're quite afraid to share their work. That's a common one, is showcasing their work online. Like a lot of people are scared of doing that, but there's nothing wrong with sharing your artwork online because the worst thing that can happen is someone can just say it looks crap or something, and they're on the other side of our computer, so they're not going to do any, they can't do anything to you. And at the end of the day, it's just a few words. It's I understand that some people take it to it far too extreme, but you just have to realize that when it comes to feedback or people criticizing your work, just take it like a pinch of salt. It's End of the day, they're just doing their I don't know, online warrior thing. They're just trying to frustrate you, or maybe they're just a bad mood type of person. Like you get these people everywhere you are. So when it comes to social media, try and ignore what people are saying and just focus on the doing. And that's the same thing that comes to your art. Focus on getting the work done. Keep working on it, even if you think it's not the greatest. Post it, see what people say, get the feedback, apply it. Don't just do what most people do and just take the feedback and or just look at the feedback and don't do anything about it. Um, but the thing about feedback as well when it comes to social media, look into the person who's giving you the feedback. So there's been a lot of times that say someone's giving me feedback and they might be like, you look on Facebook, they might only be like, I don't know, say I'm on a Facebook group page and say for example, I'm on the Pixel Logic Facebook group page and there's, I don't know, a 15-year-old or a 14-year-old giving feedback. Like they might not be the best person to give feedback, but they also might be. You don't know. Really look into the information of who you're getting the feedback from. So when I post my artwork, I like to make sure that I'm getting the right feedback from the right artists. And sometimes that also requires not posting. So sometimes just a direct message through LinkedIn. And oh my gosh, that's another beast in itself. The amount of artists that are not on LinkedIn, it's crazy. Like LinkedIn should be something that you should be benefiting all the time. So I've been on LinkedIn, gee whiz, so how long have I been on LinkedIn? I've been on LinkedIn for years, and LinkedIn has been such a staple um, to my just my knowledge on things overall. Just like not even just related to art, just everything because literally everyone's on it. And when you learn, like for example, recruiters, you learn how recruiters like to kind of reach out to people. Like you see how they post things, and you see what draws their attention. And for example, if I've done a post, you can see like who's liked it. You can see the type of people who are viewing your LinkedIn, whether they're more concept artists, they're more 3D artists, and then that gives you an inclination to what type of people are interested in your type of work. Obviously you get the people that you can't trust. Unfortunately, you don't know since you don't know the people, you can't tell if they're always telling the truth or if they're legit. That's why you have to work smart, you have to think smart, read into depth about things before you accept anything. Particularly jobs, you don't know, like there's a lot of people who are false advertising or trying to take advantage of you, and that's why I've always gone into depth into reading about the actual artists themselves. And I've done that for years. So I've always gone in LinkedIn. So say, for example, trying to get a guest on the podcast. Uh, like I don't know all the guests I'm bringing on, So that's why when I am choosing a guest for the podcast, I make sure like they have no like bad history about them, because if I have a person who's maybe discriminated against, I don't know, female artists or something, like there's been a few artists that I've heard of that in the industry have been putting other people down and stuff. Therefore, I know I won't be bringing them on the podcast because that's just a bad vibe, and that then tailors towards your brand. And that's the whole point of this podcast, is making sure that you're working smart, that you're developing a good brand for yourself. And branding is it's scary at times, and I get it, but it's also something not to be afraid of as well. I know that's kind of like a conundrum in itself, but you just have to be patient with it, and then your following will get better. And like I said, so I'm on so many platforms, like say 20 platforms. Utilize those 20 platforms as much as you can, and really think about what you're actually saying, because if you don't word it correctly, then it's just going to be pointless. So we've talked about ArtStation, and we've talked about, for example, the importance of thumbnails. We've talked about Facebook and the power of Facebook groups. We've talked about branding. So, for example, gone through about YouTube and stuff. We've also talked about reaching out to people and how to word things. But the other one thing before I finish the LinkedIn section is how you connect to people on LinkedIn. So when you connect to someone on LinkedIn, don't just press the connect button. Um, I used to be a culprit of this, so I used to just press connect all the time. But I realized that every time you reach out to someone you don't know, you want to create a strong enough relationship with them as possible, and an instant sort of element of trust. So instantly add a message in the option that says message on LinkedIn, and say why you're connecting with them, because that then just shows that you care, you appreciate what they have to offer if something does turn up, and you've given them the respect just overall that they deserve. Because respect in the day is the most important. So I've been spoilt for choice having all these amazing artists on the podcast, and I'm super grateful to have them on. So at the end of this week, we'll have 50 podcasts done. Like that's just crazy, and I'm super happy that everyone's been involved and taking part of the podcast. And um, like I said, if you have any questions, as always, so on the Share It podcast, obviously I like to open up to you guys. So if you have any questions, whether it's concept art related, 3D art related, ask away in the comment section. It doesn't matter. It's You should never be afraid when it comes to questions. Like that's the other thing. Is like so many people, especially on social media, they think that they just because they are less skilled than someone that they can't ask them for help. Like that's a common thing for artists, and it's one thing when it comes to artists that you should really stop having so much of value on, because at the end of the day everyone's on the same boat. We're all human. So if you're constantly um, stepping back from asking people for advice, then it makes things just harder, and you should be how can I say it? Like for example, every person I've had on the podcast or I've had on just getting feedback from, I've always just sent them a message like straight away, but I've sent them a message in a positive manner, and I've made sure that, like I said, once again, giving the respect they deserve. And if they don't get back to me, that's okay. Like it's okay if someone doesn't want to respond to you. At the end of the day, you can't start I guess getting frustrated and being like, oh, they didn't get back to me. You have to be aware as well that when it comes to reaching out to people, they don't know you, and until you develop more of your name, then more people kind of trust you and stuff. And that's why like all these things fall in together, all together as one. So your Facebook, so your ArtStation, your Instagram, your Twitter, the way you show yourself online is just the biggest thing overall. And it's just down to being patient. Like I always say the word being patient, asking questions, because at the end of the day, it's the thing that can make or break your social media. Because if you're constantly trying to ask, like, so I don't ask people to all the time to like follow me, because like for example, if I'm on Twitter, I never ask someone to follow me. I just say the only thing I ask is like for example the podcast to like go and subscribe, just to the podcast. But on Twitter, I don't ask for followers. Um, Obviously it's good to ask for following, like, but it's the amount of times you ask it though, and that's the problem, is that a lot of people are thinking things are just going to happen overnight, and it never happens that way. But this has just been like so this so far I've been talking for about 40 minutes. But if you have any questions when it comes to social media, even if you're listening to it on Twitch, ask away. It's your chance to ask as many questions as you can. Obviously, like I'll do my best to answer them. Um, I'm going to be going live as well on YouTube soon. So obviously the viewers go up and we can get more interactions with people. But I've just been learning the ropes on Twitch. But if you have any questions, whether it's environment art, character art, you name it, I'll get them answered for you. The episode two, or sorry, episode three of creating game environment art is literally coming out tonight. So the Game of Thrones, so you're going to get tons of content for that one. So that'll be coming out tonight. And like I said, we're going to have 4 podcasts out this week. So stay tuned, enjoy it, make the most of it. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Thanks for listening, and bye for now.